Hey everyone, I hope you're doing all right tonight. You know, life has a way of slowing us down when we least expect it, making us sit still long enough to hear our own thoughts. And if your name happens to be Sean Diddy Combs, those thoughts are all you've got these days. Behind the noise, the fame, and the spotlight, there's a man sitting quietly, thinking about everything that brought him here. They say he's been waiting for a call, a sign, a small miracle that might change the course of his story. But that call never came. It was a long weekend, the kind where time stretches out, and every minute feels heavier than the one before. The world went about its business, families gathered, music played, people laughed. But for Diddy, the clock just kept ticking. Each hour that passed reminded him that the walls weren't moving, and neither was his life. People who once cheered his name are now just voices fading in the distance. And somewhere in that silence, he's left asking himself, what does freedom really mean? They say he spent the weekend holding on to hope that someone somewhere would come through, that this wouldn't be the place where his story pauses. Maybe he sat on that narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what it felt like to stand on stage, hearing the crowd chant his name. Maybe he remembered the joy in his mother's eyes when she saw what he'd built, or the way his children used to look up to him, believing he could do no wrong. But when the lights go out and you're alone with your thoughts, even the brightest memories can turn into shadows. As the weekend faded and Monday crept closer, reality settled in. The holiday was over. The waiting had led to nothing. The truth is, no one's coming. No one's unlocking that door. It's a hard thing for any person, especially a man who once had everything, to face that kind of stillness. You can't buy time, and you can't charm your way out of consequence. The man who once moved millions now can't move a single thing without permission. That's the kind of silence that can either break you or teach you who you really are. They say that in those quiet hours he started pacing, not out of anger, but out of restlessness. The kind that eats at you from the inside. Every sound, every breath becomes louder when the world stops moving. He thought about choices. All the choices that built him up, and the ones that tore it all down. Fame makes you believe you're untouchable. But time has a way of touching every one of us. No matter who you are, you will face the day when you must answer to yourself. People close to him said he'd been asking the same question again and again. Is it worth it? Is it worth giving up everything? The money, the memories, the legacy, just to step outside a few years earlier? Because when you lose your freedom, every minute becomes priceless. They say he could offer money, connections, anything that still carries his name. But the real debt isn't the kind you pay with cash. It's the kind you pay with truth, humility, and time. And that's the part he can't escape. When you build your world on power, you start to believe power is the answer to every problem. But power doesn't comfort you when the lights are off. It doesn't hold you when the walls close in. The truth is, when everything else is stripped away, you find out what really matters: your peace, your faith, your family, and your soul. All the rest is just noise. Some say Diddy has been reflecting a lot, maybe even breaking down in small moments when no one's looking. Because when you've lived a lifetime in the spotlight, silence becomes the loudest thing you'll ever hear. They say he's been thinking about his mother, about how she raised him to believe he could conquer the world. And maybe he did. But conquering the world means nothing if you lose yourself along the way. Maybe this time life isn't punishing him, maybe it's teaching him. Teaching him to stop running, to sit with what's real, and to learn that no amount of fame can protect you from your own reflection. There's something about isolation that forces clarity. You start seeing people for who they are, and yourself for who you've become. Maybe that's what this long weekend was really about, a moment for Diddy to stop performing and just be. To strip away the layers, the pride, the noise, and remember the boy who once dreamed before the man who started building empires. The same boy who believed music could save lives. Maybe deep down he's still searching for that boy again, the one who smiled without needing cameras to notice. Time slows down in those walls. You start counting the things you took for granted, the laughter of your children, the taste of a meal, the sound of your own footsteps outside. Freedom becomes something simple. Not cars or fame or power, just a breath of fresh air, a walk under the sun, the right to decide when to stand and when to sit. That's when the weight of it all starts pressing down. And you begin to wonder, was it all worth it? People say that by the time the weekend ended, Diddy looked exhausted. Not from lack of sleep, but from the battle inside. He's learning that peace doesn't come from the outside world. It starts within. And maybe this long, quiet wait is what he needs to finally find it. Maybe this silence, the one that feels endless, is actually the sound of change beginning. Because the truth is, no one escapes their lessons. We all get called to face ourselves sooner or later. For some, it happens quietly in the middle of life. For others, it happens when everything has already fallen apart. But for Diddy, it's happening now, behind the walls in the dark with nothing left to distract him. The man who once controlled the rhythm of the world is now being forced to listen to his own heart. And maybe that's the rhythm that matters most. As Monday arrives and the world outside moves forward, Diddy remains in the same place. Still waiting, still wondering, still learning what real strength looks like. It's not in the luxury, not in the applause, not in the headlines. Real strength is in the quiet moments when no one's watching, and you finally choose to face yourself. The long weekend had come and gone, and Sean Diddy Combs woke to the same gray light slipping through the narrow window of his cell. Time doesn't move the same in places like that. It stretches, it bends, it taunts you. Every morning feels like yesterday, and every night feels endless. Somewhere in that stretch of quiet, he began to think, really think, about the weight of choices. They say a person's life is just the sum of every decision they've ever made. Some choices lift you up, others haunt you for years. Diddy had lived his whole life making choices that shaped an empire. Where to perform, who to sign, what to build next. He once believed every decision was a move in a game he couldn't lose. But now, with the noise gone, all that's left are the echoes of those choices. Some proud, some painful, all permanent. People around him say he spends hours pacing, tracing invisible steps across the floor. You can almost imagine him counting in his head, not numbers but memories. Every argument, every deal, every night that could have gone differently. In those moments, you realize how heavy regret can be. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And its voice grows louder in silence. He's been offered a way out, or so they say. Something that could ease the weight pressing down on him. But the cost is unimaginable. Not just in money, but in meaning. To trade away everything you've ever built, every bit of power, every piece of pride, just to breathe fresh air again, it's not an easy bargain. For a man who's spent decades being larger than life, the idea of surrender doesn't come naturally. But maybe surrender is exactly what he needs. Some say he's reaching out to old friends, people he once trusted, asking for help. But the world changes fast, and loyalty fades when money and fame disappear. Phones that once rang all night stay silent now. The same people who once cheered his name are too busy chasing their own lives to look back. And maybe that's part of the lesson. You learn who's really in your corner when you have nothing left to give. It's said that Diddy's mind has been caught in a tug of war. Part of him still clinging to the man he used to be, the other part realizing that version of him might be gone for good. Change doesn't come easy, especially for someone who's always been in control. But the truth is, life doesn't ask for permission when it decides to humble you. It just does. You see, choices have a way of collecting interest. Every one of them, good or bad, adds up until the day the bill comes due. For years, Diddy's choices built him palaces and headlines, but they also built walls he never noticed until they closed in around him. And now, he's standing face to face with those choices, wondering which ones were really worth it. In that stillness, he thinks of his family, his children, their faces, their voices, the way they used to run into his arms. He built so much to give them everything: security, pride, legacy. But what good is legacy when your presence is missing? What comfort is money when it can't hold your child at night? Those are the questions that haunt him now. Not about fame or fortune, but about the kind of father, the kind of man he's been. There's a certain loneliness that only comes when you realize the world has moved on without you. Diddy used to be the one setting the pace, the one everyone followed. Now the rhythm has changed. The music goes on without him. New faces rise, new voices fill the airwaves, and the world that once revolved around his name doesn't even look back. It's a quiet kind of heartbreak, not the kind that breaks your spirit, but the kind that makes you finally see the truth. And the truth is simple. Everything fades. The fame, the power, the applause, they all have an expiration date. What remains are the choices we made when no one was watching. Did we love people enough? Did we forgive enough? Did we live in a way that brought peace instead of chaos? Diddy, in his silence, might be asking himself those very questions. They say some nights he talks to himself, not out of madness, but out of searching. You can imagine him whispering to the walls, to God, to anyone who might listen. Maybe he's asking for another chance. Maybe he's just trying to understand how he got here. There's no manager to spin this story, no stage to perform on, just the truth staring him down, refusing to look away. And that's where real change begins, in that uncomfortable space where you can't run anymore. where every memory, every choice, every face you hurt shows up, one by one. It's not punishment, it's awakening. And awakening hurts before it heals. Some might call it karma, others might call it fate. But perhaps it's something gentler, a divine pause. A moment meant to strip away everything that blinded him, so he can finally see what's real. Maybe this isn't the end of his story, but the middle. The part where the hero finally breaks enough to become human again. He still walks with a certain pride, they say. That old habit of keeping his head high even when the weight of the world is on his shoulders. But there are cracks in the armor now. He's softer when he speaks, slower when he moves. Maybe for the first time in his life, he's learning that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's wisdom. When you've lived your whole life building walls, you forget what it's like to be open. But life has a way of tearing down what pride builds up. And when it does, it gives you a chance, a painful, priceless chance, to start again, not as the star, but as the soul. By the end of the week, Diddy had stopped asking for news. He stopped pacing so much. Maybe he realized that no one was coming to rescue him. That the only way out was through the pain, through the silence, through the slow work of forgiveness. Because forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't about others. It's about yourself. It's about looking at the man in the mirror and saying, you did wrong. You fell, but you can still rise again. So now he waits, not for a phone call, not for a door to open, but for something far more important, for peace. The kind that doesn't depend on headlines or deals, but on acceptance. Acceptance that life is fragile. That choices matter. And that no matter how far you fall, grace still waits for you, if you're brave enough to reach for it. And maybe, just maybe, this is where his real story begins. Not the story of fame or power, but the story of redemption. The story of a man learning that strength isn't about how loud you can be, but how deeply you can listen when life finally whispers the truth. The nights were the hardest. In daylight, there were distractions. Footsteps echoing through hallways, guards calling names, the hum of the building's tired electricity. But at night, everything stopped. The silence pressed against the walls like a second skin. That's when the ghosts came, not the kind that haunt with fear, but the kind that haunt with memory. Diddy lay awake on the thin mattress, eyes tracing cracks in the ceiling, his mind drifting through years he'd buried under fame and noise. Every face, every moment, every mistake began to play back like a movie he couldn't turn off. The applause, the money, the nights filled with light, all of it flashing in contrast with the emptiness of now. He remembered the first time he felt truly unstoppable, standing on stage, the crowd chanting his name, lights blinding, cameras flashing. In that moment, he thought he had it all figured out. He believed success would protect him from pain. That power could buy forgiveness. That love would last as long as the money did. But time, that quiet teacher, has a way of proving every illusion wrong. It wasn't the scandals or the headlines that hurt the most. It was the people he lost along the way. The friends who became strangers. The women who once saw the man behind the fame, but eventually walked away. The partners who stayed silent when things fell apart. In those memories, he found both comfort and guilt. Comfort because he remembered love, and guilt because he knew he'd taken it for granted. He thought about Kim Porter. Her smile. Her voice. The way she could calm him when nothing else could. She had been the mirror that showed him who he was, not as Diddy the mogul, but as Sean, the man beneath the armor. Losing her left a hollow space that no success could fill. And now, in the quiet, that space had grown into something heavy, a constant ache he couldn't ignore. The ghosts of his past weren't angry, they were honest. They didn't scream. They simply reminded him of what he'd forgotten. Humility, gratitude, love without conditions. For years, he'd been surrounded by noise. Interviews, parties, power moves. But the truth doesn't live in noise. It lives in the silence that follows when everything's gone. He saw flashes of his younger self. That hungry kid from Harlem who believed he could change the world. And in many ways, he did. He gave people music, moments, memories. But he also built his world on speed, never pausing to breathe. Ambition became addiction, and addiction became escape. Now he couldn't run anymore. Somewhere deep down, he wondered if God had been trying to get his attention all along. Maybe every setback, every betrayal, every loss wasn't punishment but preparation. Maybe this stillness, this isolation, was the only way to make him finally listen. To strip away the empire, the name, the pride, and leave only the truth. A man learning to face himself. In one of those long nights, he picked up a pen and started writing. Not lyrics, not business notes, just words, honest words, letters to people he'd hurt, to those he missed, to his children. He wrote to his mother, thanking her for her strength, To his sons, reminding them to be better than he was. To his daughters, promising to make peace with his mistakes. It wasn't for the world. It wasn't for an audience. It was for him, for healing. Sometimes healing doesn't look like joy. It looks like honesty. It looks like admitting that you broke things you can't fix. It looks like sitting alone in the dark and saying, "I was wrong." That's where he was now, not seeking pity, not defending himself, just accepting the truth as it is. He thought about the industry too, the people who cheered when he rose and whispered when he fell. Fame is a strange currency. It buys you everything but costs you your peace. The same lights that make you visible also expose your flaws. And once the world decides you're no longer a hero, they turn those same lights into spotlights of judgment. Diddy knew that feeling too well. Still, in the midst of all that, something unexpected began to grow: gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to see the truth before it was too late. Gratitude for time, even if it came in chains. Because clarity, even when it hurts, is a gift not everyone gets. He began to pray again, not with the rehearsed confidence of a man who has everything, but with the trembling honesty of someone who has nothing left but hope. It wasn't about asking for miracles. It was about asking for peace, for forgiveness, for understanding. And as he prayed, he realized forgiveness isn't something that comes once. It's something you earn every day, in thought, in action, in humility. The kind of forgiveness that rebuilds you from the inside out. Sometimes, late at night, the guards said they could hear faint humming coming from his cell. Maybe it was an old tune, maybe something new. But there was a softness to it, a tone that carried both sorrow and peace. Music had always been his language, and even now, stripped of everything, it found a way back. Perhaps that's what kept him alive, the music inside him refusing to die. He remembered the early days, Biggie, the studio sessions, the laughter that filled those rooms, the dreams that felt too big to touch. Those were pure times, before fame complicated love, before money blurred morals, before ego drowned out reason. Those ghosts didn't come to torment him. They came to remind him who he used to be, and who he could still become. As dawn crept in, soft and pale, Diddy sat by the window again, breathing in air that smelled of dust and rust, but also of renewal. Every day felt like a battle between the man he was and the man he wanted to be. And maybe that's what redemption really is. Not a clean slate, but a daily choice to keep walking, even when your past follows close behind. He once thought the world owed him understanding. Now he realized he owed the world truth. Not a story polished for cameras, but the raw truth of a man who rose too high, fell too hard, and still dared to hope. Hope, it's a fragile thing but powerful. It doesn't erase pain, but it helps you carry it. And somewhere between his memories and his prayers, hope began to return, quietly, humbly, like the first light after a long night. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe more silence, maybe more trials. But he did know one thing: he was still here, still breathing, still learning. And that in itself was grace. Because sometimes grace doesn't look like freedom. It looks like the chance to begin again, even from the ashes. Morning light seeped through the narrow bars, soft but cold. It drew thin lines across the concrete floor, slicing the room into fragments of gold and gray. Diddy sat still, elbows on his knees, staring at the faint shimmer. There was something about the light, quiet, unassuming, yet full of meaning. It didn't demand attention, it just existed. He wondered if that's what peace felt like, not loud, not proud, just there. He hadn't looked in the mirror for days. The small metal sheet on the wall was dull, warped, and unforgiving. But that morning, something inside him said, "Face it." So he stood up slowly, walked to it, and looked. The man staring back wasn't the one from magazine covers or red carpets. His eyes were heavier now, not from sleepless nights, but from seeing too much. His face had lines that success once hid. His expression wasn't angry. It was honest. For the first time, he didn't see the mogul, the legend, or the controversy. He saw Sean, the son, the father, the man who'd made mistakes and now carried their weight quietly. In that warped reflection, he realized something simple yet powerful. The truth doesn't destroy you. Denial does. The truth only hurts when you keep running from it. He whispered to himself, "This is who I am now," not as a confession, but as acceptance. Acceptance that he was broken, and that being broken didn't mean being beyond repair. Every scar on his soul had a story, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding from them. He thought about how the world had always seen him as confident, untouchable, almost mythic. But legends, he now understood, are built on illusions. Real strength isn't in never falling. It's in standing up again when everyone's watching you fail. The mirror, for once, didn't reflect an image. It reflected truth, the kind that humbles and heals at the same time. As he stared, fragments of the past came flooding back. The studio sessions where laughter mixed with ambition. The tours that blurred days into nights. The parties that felt endless but left him empty. He remembered moments when he could have chosen differently, words he could have spoken softer, hearts he could have protected more carefully. But regret, he realized, only has power if you let it define you. He couldn't change his past, but he could decide what kind of man would rise from it. Somewhere between guilt and grace, Diddy began to pray again. Not with words rehearsed or memorized, but with truth. "Show me who I'm supposed to be now," he murmured. It wasn't a plea for escape, it was a request for direction. That day, he started to live differently, even in confinement. He began reading more, listening more, writing again. Letters, lyrics, thoughts, small pieces of clarity forming a new kind of rhythm. For the first time in decades, he wasn't chasing success. He was chasing understanding. He thought about his children often, not as extensions of his fame, but as souls he was responsible for guiding. He wanted them to see more than the headlines. He wanted them to know the truth about life, that you can fall from the highest places and still find your way back if you walk in humility. In the afternoons, he sometimes spoke with other men inside. Men who had stories like his: pride, power, loss, and slow realization. They didn't see Diddy the celebrity. They saw Sean, the man sitting across from them, trying to make sense of his own soul. And in those quiet conversations, he found something he hadn't felt in years: connection without condition. No judgment, no cameras, just humanity. One of the men once told him, "You're lucky, man. Most of us don't get to see the truth until it's too late." That line stuck with him. Lucky, not for the fame, not for the fortune, but for the pause. Because sometimes life stops you to save you. As days turned into weeks, Diddy noticed the world inside him shifting. The anger that once fueled him was softening. The defensiveness that once protected him was fading. He wasn't interested in proving anything anymore. He just wanted peace. Real peace, the kind that can't be bought, only earned through honesty and surrender. At night, he wrote a line that would stay with him. "The mirror doesn't lie, but it doesn't judge either." It became his mantra. Every time he faced the reflection, he reminded himself, truth isn't punishment, it's the path to freedom. Outside those walls, the world kept moving. Stories were told, opinions were made, narratives shaped. But he didn't chase them anymore. For once, he wasn't fighting to control his image. He was learning to live without one. The peace in that realization was quiet, but powerful. One afternoon, a guard dropped off a letter from one of his daughters. The handwriting was neat, the tone tender. She wrote about her life, her dreams, her faith. At the end, she said, "Daddy, I still believe in you. Not the man everyone talks about, but the one I know you can be." Those words pierced him deeper than any headline ever could. They reminded him that love, real love, waits for redemption. It doesn't demand perfection, it just asks for truth. He sat with that letter for hours, reading it again and again, as if the ink itself carried warmth. In that moment, something broke open inside him, not from shame, but from hope. Hope that maybe his story wasn't ending here. That maybe this was the middle, the sacred space where transformation begins. And slowly, he started to forgive himself. Not fully, not yet, forgiveness is never sudden, but one layer at a time. He forgave the boy who chased validation, the man who mistook control for love, the artist who thought noise could drown out pain. Each apology, whispered into the stillness, felt like a small resurrection. He began to understand that the mirror of truth doesn't show you who you were. It shows you who you can become if you're brave enough to face it. And facing it meant owning everything, the glory, the mistakes, the silence. One night, as he lay awake, he whispered into the dark, "Maybe this is grace. Not freedom from consequence, but freedom from denial. Grace that allows a man to rebuild from ashes, even when the world has already written his ending." The next morning, he looked at the light again, those same golden lines painting the floor. They hadn't changed, but he had. He wasn't just existing anymore. He was awakening, slowly, quietly, truthfully. And somewhere between that light and his reflection, Sean Diddy Combs began to find something he'd lost long ago, himself. There comes a moment in every life when noise fades, and all that remains is truth, soft, steady, and unrelenting. For Diddy, that moment arrived quietly one evening, long after the world had turned its back, long after the cameras had stopped flashing. The sky outside his narrow window was a deep shade of blue, fading slowly into night. He could hear faint murmurs in the distance, laughter, footsteps, the soft clank of metal doors, but inside his heart, everything had gone still. He sat at his small desk, a stack of papers before him, his pen hovering over the first page. They weren't lyrics, not anymore. They were letters. One for each person who had once shared his world. To his children, to old friends, to people he had hurt, and even to himself. Each word came slowly, deliberate, honest. The man who once wrote for fame was now writing for forgiveness. He started with his mother. He wrote, "You gave me love I didn't always deserve. You taught me faith I didn't always understand. I chased the world when I should have held on to you." His eyes stung, and for the first time, he didn't blink it away. The tears were part of the truth now. Then he wrote to his children, "You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to live in anyone's shadow. I know the name you carry has been heavy, but don't let it weigh down your light. Be kind, be honest, be free." He paused for a long time after that. The silence around him didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like space, sacred space, where healing was finally possible. He thought about how everything he once built had been made from noise. The music, the power, the endless motion. But life had stripped all that away until there was only stillness. And in that stillness, he found something he never expected: clarity. It wasn't about the fame or the deals or even the empire. It was about love, the one thing he had taken for granted the most. There's a strange beauty in starting over when the world thinks you're finished. Because in that quiet corner, stripped of everything, you finally learn what truly matters. Diddy began to see that his real empire was never his label, his awards, or his legacy. His real empire was the love he gave, and the love he could still rebuild, if he chose humility over pride. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He became known among the others inside not as Diddy, but simply as Sean. He'd sit with men who had lost everything, and instead of preaching, he listened. He heard stories of pain, forgiveness, and small mercies. He realized that every person, no matter how broken, carried a spark of goodness still waiting to be seen. One afternoon, he joined a small music group inside the walls. There were no fancy instruments, no recording booths, just old guitars, makeshift drums, and tired voices. But when they sang, something magical happened. For a few moments, the walls felt wider, the air lighter. Music, once his weapon of fame, had become his medicine. It wasn't about selling anymore. It was about healing. They sang gospel songs, old soul tracks, and sometimes pieces he'd written quietly at night. The men around him didn't know the music industry. They didn't care about charts or awards. They just sang. And in their imperfect harmony, Diddy found something purer than any platinum record: truth. He started a small group discussion every Friday. Not formal, not planned. Just men sitting in a circle, talking about what they regretted, what they missed, and what they hoped for. For many, it was the first time they'd ever spoken without fear. For Diddy, it was the first time he'd ever listened without ego. "Sometimes," he said one evening, "you have to lose everything to understand anything." The others nodded. They knew exactly what he meant. At night, he'd lie in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, whispering small prayers. Not for freedom, not anymore, but for peace. Peace for the people he had hurt. Peace for his children. Peace for the man he was still learning to become. One morning, the guard called his name for mail. It was another letter, this time from his eldest son. The words were simple. "We're proud of you, Dad. Not because of what you did, but because of what you're becoming." He sat there for a long time holding that letter. Those words felt like sunlight. They filled the room with something warm and alive. He realized redemption doesn't arrive all at once. It comes slowly through moments like that, quiet, undeserved, and profoundly real. Over time, Diddy began mentoring younger men who arrived inside, scared, lost, angry. He told them not to waste their pain. "Pain's a teacher," he said softly. "If you listen to it, it'll show you who you really are." They listened because when he spoke now, it wasn't from pride but from experience. He started keeping a journal he called The Road to Redemption. Page by page, he filled it with lessons, not excuses, reflections about forgiveness, about learning to let go, about finding meaning in the moments that hurt the most. One of his favorite lines read, "Redemption isn't given to you. You walk toward it one step at a time, even when your feet are bleeding." There were days he struggled, days when the memories hit too hard, when the shame crept back in. But he learned to breathe through it, to remind himself that healing isn't linear. Some days you rise, some days you simply survive, but every day you move a little closer to grace. And then, one morning years later, his name was called again, this time not for mail but for release. The words came quietly, without fanfare. Pack your things. You're going home. Home. The word felt heavy and strange. What was home now? It wasn't the mansion, the studio, or the world he'd once ruled. It was something smaller, gentler, a space inside his heart that finally felt at peace. As he walked toward the gate, the same sunlight that used to slice through the cell walls now fell across his face in full. He stopped for a moment and let it wash over him. That light, it felt like forgiveness. Outside, the air was different. Softer. Free. He took a deep breath, looked up, and whispered, "Thank you." Not to fame, not to luck, but to life itself for breaking him just enough to let him rebuild the right way. He didn't know what the world would say about him now. Maybe they'd never forget. Maybe they'd never forgive. But he had learned that true redemption isn't about being understood. It's about understanding yourself. He walked slowly, not as a man running from his past, but as one walking toward his future. A future built not on image, but on truth. And as he reached the open road, his mind echoed with the same words he had written years ago in that cell. The mirror doesn't lie, but it doesn't judge either. He smiled softly, the wind brushing his face like a quiet blessing. Maybe that was life's secret all along. Not perfection, not power, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when a man finally looks in the mirror and sees not who he was, but who he's finally become.